Hello, welcome to my little trip down road testing memory lane. I'm on my travels. I'm at the TT this episode. I think I can hear a bike, super stock race. Got to, can't beat the smell of race fuel in the morning. Yeah, got to witness Michael Dunlop making history. Wow. Being the mountain goat, the most successful TT rider. So stay tuned to the end of this video because we get to speak to Carl Cox, who's one of Michael's big sponsors. So last time out we were speaking about journalist bias. We won't talk too much about that again. It was a divisive subject, and I think for those doubters, it's going to be hard to change people's minds, but you know, I think it's a subject worth talking about every now and then. It's what I do for a living, so obviously I want to defend you know, me and my colleagues, and I also think journalism has got an important part to play in the world. You know, it holds people to account, whether it's world leaders, if it's politicians or motorcycle manufacturers, so it's got an important place in the world. But anyway, so what I'm going to do now is talk about some more lighter Q&A subjects. So let's begin. I've got my notes written here. So the first question is from Las1Go286. Hi Neezy, I'd like to ask your opinion about rear brake use on sport bikes, both road and track. I recently watched a Random Dudes video. He was blasting down on the Nurburgring on his R1. In that comments of that video, he said he's hardly using any rear brake at those speeds, and people backed him up, demonising the use of rear brakes on sport bikes. I think the opposite. My rear brakes wear out together with the fronts more or less. I think it's important to use a rear brake for bike control. If it wasn't, then there wouldn't be so many rear brake setups on the bars of various MotoGP and WSB bikes. Oh, brilliant. Thanks for the question. Absolutely. Rear brakes are really important nowadays in riding. I guess they always have been. But the thing is, I suppose, you know, when I was starting to ride in the late 80s all the way through the 90s and the noughties, rear brakes weren't really a thing. Everyone just used to use the fronts more or less. People didn't really talk about using rear brakes. And you can get away with riding all your life with no rear brake and just using the front. It's absolutely fine, you know, whether you're racing or riding on the road. But rear brakes are really, really an important tool for bike control. I've been living on my rear brake now for over a decade on the road and the track, and you know, it just gives you, it feels like the bike, we've spoken about it before, you've got a third wheel. It kind of drags the back of the bike into the ground, gives you so much stability, so much control. You know, whether it's, you don't actually use it for braking power as such, although MotoGP bikes do a little bit because their rear tyres are so sticky. But it just gives you just a bit of stability. So when you drag the rear brake and the front, when you're braking, the bike sits down more level. It's not pivoting over the front. So, you know, that makes the bike more stable. It's less stress on your body, on your wrists, where you're sort of braking right on the bike's nose. You can also drag a little bit of brake going into the corners, a little bit of trail brake, which helps the bike turn. If the bike's running a little bit wide at the apex, you can rear brake it just to pull the bike in a little bit, and then coming out of corners on a super bike or a super naked, you can give it a little bit of rear brake to stop it wheeling, which is a good thing because it means you don't have to ease off the throttle, you don't have to climb all over the bike, and also you don't trouble the electronics. Sometimes wheelie control can be too intrusive, so rear brakes are definitely a good thing. But that's a brilliant question, thank you very much. Next is from Mason Van Dyke. Before my question, a request. It'd be great to see you on RevZilla's High Side, Low Side podcast, if you could make the time difference work. As for my question, I live in Japan and have started doing some track days recently on my Do It All 2019 Tracer 900 GT Plus. It seems like splitting into slow and fast groups isn't really a thing here as it is back home, which means I'm generally sharing the track with people both faster and much slower than me. Do you have any tips for both staying safe and for not being a nuisance on track in such scenarios? Well, thanks very much for your question. As for the podcast, I think you probably see enough of me on here to see me again on someone else's podcast. And as for kind of tips on track for keeping safe, you know, with your bike, you know, a Tracer 900 GT Plus is a good bike. It's probably quite capable around the track, but obviously, you know, it's never going to be as fast as a dedicated sports bike around the track. So, you know, obviously the speed's not going to be there compared to some other people. But my only piece of advice really for riding on track is to do your own thing. Never double guess what someone else is going to do. Ride your own lines, do your own braking points, you know, just worry about yourself. So never ever look behind you. When you're turning into corners, which I've seen a lot of road riders do on track, you know, especially at hairpins, they do the old mirror signal maneuver, but don't do that because you'll be trying to move out of other people's way and then they don't know what you're going to do. If you just do your own thing, other people will be able to get around you. And tape up your mirrors. Take your mirrors off, tape them up, fold them in so you've got no idea what's behind you. And yeah, just do your own thing. So that would be my advice for staying safe. And you know, on top of that, just concentrate on your riding and having fun. So thank you very much for your question. Next is from at Terrace View. Hi mate, would you think it would be safe to buy Benelli 1130 Tre K Amazonas? The BMW and KTM adventure bikes are insanely pricey here in Australia, but there are a couple of Benellis for sale. They look good, but I have no idea about reliability and or parts availability. Have you ever ridden one? Would appreciate your input. Well, thanks very much, Terrace View. The Benelli Tre K was a really good bike actually. It's probably one of those bikes that was quite ahead of its time. You could probably compare it, like the Amazonas version was the more kind of off-roady adventure version of this bike, but the Tre K was based on the Tornado Super with an upright riding position, straight bars and a bit of a fairing. So in a lot of ways it's quite similar to today's Multistrada or BMW S1000 XR or KTM 1290 Super Duke GT, that kind of bike. At the time, kind of didn't really fit in anywhere, but I remember having a bit of an argument with our deputy editor at MCN when we were choosing our bikes of the year in maybe something like 2007, and I chose the Benelli as kind of the sports tourer of the year, which I managed to get my own way, and it was a fantastic sports tourer for the same reasons that tall rounders are so popular now. You know, very roomy, you still got a lot of performance. That 3-cylinder engine was absolutely fantastic. So it was a really, really great bike to ride. You know, I'd recommend getting one if you really fancy one. The Amazonas version was kind of more of an adventure style, more knobbly tyres, a bit more off-road styling. But I suppose the only kind of thing to watch out for is the fact that they don't make them anymore. Is getting hold of parts and spares for the bike. You know, if you could find somewhere where you knew you could take it to get serviced and you knew you could get parts back up, then I think it's a no-brainer. You know, they never really had any major mechanical faults as far as I know. Probably a good idea to look at MCN's owners' reviews on their website. There was a really good source of information for buying used bikes. Other than that, I think it's a great choice. If you can get a good deal on one and you can look after it, then why the hell not? Go for it. Next is from Seamus Morrison 7224. Thanks very much for your question. Hey Pops. Huge fan of your channel and your opinions for motorbikes. You for motorbikes and Chris Harris for cars are my favourite journos. Thank you very much. Question 1, favourite car you've ever driven fast? Question 2, I was wondering if you'd ever consider doing a Nurburgring lap instruction video on a bike or just a Nurburgring vlog. And what experience do you have on the ring? Thoughts on the bikes, on the green hell? Fastest lap you've done, is it too dangerous, etc. Many thanks, Seamus. Well, great question. Well, yeah, Chris Harris. I mean, I love watching Chris Harris's stuff. You know, he can walk the walk as well as talk the talk, which is what I love most about him. And just down to earth. You know, he just doesn't follow that PR kind of injected view on cars like a lot of journalists. Anyway, question 1: favourite car you ever driven fast? I would say my brother has got a nice collection of GT 911s, so probably one of those. And then the Nurburgring. So yeah, I've been going to the Nurburgring since 99 or 2000, when it was like €8 a lap. Used to go there every year, maybe twice a year, sort of ever since probably up to COVID really. So I know the circuit really well, you know, enough to get going around there pretty quick. I've never really timed myself, but you know, I thought I would imagine I would be kind of 740, 50 kind of pace on a good bike. In terms of doing videos, we actually did an MCM video in 2008 of kind of a trip to the Nurburgring, a bit of a vloggy video, so check that out. We actually do there's a nice route on there that we took, which kind of takes all day to get to the ring from Calais, but it's all real nice stuff, real nice roads that goes through Belgium, Luxembourg and into Germany. But I wouldn't say I would be an expert enough to give any kind of riding tips or advice around the ring, but a really good place to go there is there's a chap called Dale Lomas, who I used to work with at MCN and Performance Bikes back in the day. He fell in love with the Nurburgring. He moved there and he works there, and he's got his own YouTube channel called Bridge to Gantry. So if you check out his stuff, you'll find loads of good tips there, and you know, you can contact him, and he does instruction around there. He does ring taxi stuff, it's brilliant. And then an old friend of mine called Billy Burke, who's a friend of mine from Ramsgate, and he moved to the ring for the same reason. He absolutely loved it. And you can kind of catch him there, and he's always at the track, he's always willing to give good advice. So yeah, but I absolutely love the place, and hopefully I'm going to be going there on my KTM in August time. So thank you very much for that question. And next is from Kuzi Maluza 777. Hello from Texas. Hello mate. Why is the Speed Triple 1200 RS the forgotten super naked? It always seems to get left out of discussion and never invited to comparos. I'm sick of it. Well, there's a lot of capital letters in there, so yeah, I can see probably a little bit angry, but thank you very much for the question. Speed Triple 1200 RS came out in 2021. That was kind of a bit of a COVID launch for us. We initially got the bike from the factory, sort of an exclusive ride. I remember riding it from the factory, doing a road test on it, and then there was a launch after that, which was at Donington. Some of it was on the road, some of it was around the track, and it was a new engine for Triumph, new chassis, new everything, and it is a decent bike. I mean, it's probably very stiff, too stiff for the road, the way the springs are set up. You know, when I first rode it, I just took all the compression out of the rear shock to try and soften it off, and some preload, and it, you know, you still can't, if a spring's too stiff, there's only so much you can do to make a bike feel softer. So it's got quite a harsh ride, and it probably is a little bit better around track than it is on the road. But despite the power it's got, and despite its 3-cylinder engine, which, you know, sounds quite good, it kind of just lacks a little bit of character. And in its initial group tests, it never did that well against the establishment, you know, the Tuonos and the KTMs and the Street Fighters and the MT10s. You know, it kind of finishes last in a few of the group tests that we had, and it's kind of in that kind of almost no man's land between a soft Japanese sports naked like a CB1000R and a proper super naked like an Aprilia Tuono. It's kind of in that kind of middle ground. And the thing is with group tests is when we put group tests together, as I'm sure it's the same with any magazine, you've got to kind of draw a line with how many bikes you include in a group test. If you wanted to do a sports naked group test, you could probably fit 10 bikes in there. And that's not always feasible and always a good idea, because if bikes don't change from year to year, what's the point in keep testing them and for them to keep coming last or second to last or whatever? Especially with MCN, the focus is always for new bikes because it's a newspaper. So, you know, the last few group tests we've done just concentrates on the kind of the newer stuff. So for example, this year the new KTM came out, so we put it against its closest rivals, which was the M1000, the Street Fighter, and what would the other one be? Street Fighter, M1000, oh, and Tuono, obviously. So it was just those bikes. There wouldn't really be any point putting the Triumph in there because, you know, it wouldn't have done that well. But I guess, you know, next time an MT10 comes out, or next time new Japanese naked come out, the Triumph would find its way into that group test. Or indeed, if Triumph updated the speed triple, then it would be back in the limelight again. But yeah, sometimes bikes kind of just fall off the radar a little bit. But it's not because we hate them or anything like that. It's just for those reasons I explained. That is the end of your questions. But given that we're at the TT, given that Michael Dunlop has just made history, I thought I would ask Carl Cox a couple of my own questions about the TT. And after that, I'm going to sign off and say thank you very much for watching. If you like this, please like and subscribe. We'll see you again for the next video, and I'm going to hand over to Mr. Cox. Thanks for being part of my video, Carl.
Absolutely.
So, got two questions for you. Number one, if you could choose any part of the TT course on any bike, what would it be?
Part of the TT course on any bike. Well, I do like a BMW S1000RR. You know, it's one of those bikes that just does everything, and as you know, I do enjoy riding them. I think that the best part for me is going up the mountain course. It's really tricky. It kind of reels you in, but you need to understand where you're going up there to get the best out of it. And of course, you can use all of the road because it's one way, of course, the Isle of Man TT. So for me, it's the mountain, for sure.
Number two, what's it like having your name plastered down the side of the bike of the most successful TT rider ever now?
You know what? It really hasn't sunk in yet to know how that feels for me to have that moment with Michael, knowing that one day it was going to happen at some point. For most of my life, I've always heard about Jerry being the king of the mountain, and quite rightly so, and respectably so. Was anyone else going to round his numbers up? For me, at that particular time, maybe 4 or 5 years, not 4 or 5, about 10 years before, when Michael was just started his campaign, obviously for him riding on the Isle of Man TT and then gaining momentum, I knew it was possible, but I didn't realise it was possible with my name being associated with him in such a way. We are really great friends. We're really good mates, even though I'm half his age, and he's half my age. We see each other as kindred spirits. We love motorsports cars. We love the life we're leading. You know, at the end of the day, he knows nothing else apart from road racing. This is. I asked him a question about that. He said, "I don't know to do anything else in the way that he, you know, that he basically enjoys, revels in it. He really loves what he does, and he does it for himself. He does it for his family, and he does it for the honour of the Dunlop dynasty. And I totally get that.
Yeah, and he doesn't mind a bit of dance music either, does he?
No, I've taken it to a few clubs, which absolutely blew his mind, and he was forever grateful for that. There was one instance with Michael where I had him at the Zoo Project in Ibiza once, and I don't think anyone realised that in the middle of the dance floor was Michael Dunlop dancing, two-stepping, with a pint in his hand. I said to him about being behind me in the DJ booth. And he goes, "Oh, I don't want to be behind the DJ booth. I want to go out there with the people." So I said, "Okay, do you need anybody with me?" "Oh, no, I'm okay." So he went down there with his friend and he was dancing away and he had his hands in the air. And I thought, that's just awesome. It was a pleasure to have him share a moment like that from my side of what I do for him.
Brilliant. What a guy. Thanks very much, Carl.
Thank you, Michael.